that. Yeah, it takes that little 2 seconds, but we'll have to wait for that. Yes, now it is okay. So, Gabriela, thank you very much for coming in. And all your fans who are waiting for you for the last, what, it got a little delayed, I understand, because you had something to do. But thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you. I'm sorry for being late, but duty called, so I couldn't be in two places at the same time.
Perfect. That's perfectly all right. People are going to watch it on YouTube whenever they get time, so not a problem at all. So today what we're doing is we're doing under the Vision 2026. There is these points that I put down. One of them was heart, soul, and spirituality. So what we're doing today is we're talking about heart, soul, and spirituality, and how I feel that that's been left out in the discussion when mediation and mediators are discussed. So it's your view on that. But Gabriel, do you want to introduce yourself first? Do you want to talk about yourself first?
Okay. So I have been a mediator for a lot more than 20 years, but time flies. And I have done mediation in the most different contexts, from public schools in very violent areas to big corporations to conflicts with Native Indians. And I'm sorry, I have to stop. Just one moment. Pega ali, por favor, na bolsinha de fora. Não, tá aqui nessa bolsa. Okay. Sorry. So I have done mediation in the most different contexts. And I really believe that mediation is maybe the biggest step that humanity could make in terms of connecting heart, soul, spirituality, and objective needs, problems that need to be solved, very concrete, very tangible. So mediation is the only methodology that we knew so far to really integrate all these dimensions of life into the resolution that can not only fix the problem, but avoid new problems and help us build a better life out of a bad moment. So throughout this mediation path, I was a GEMS fellow, now Weinstein International Foundation fellow, and I've been in many countries around the world, the most different cultures, learning about mediation, talking about mediation, doing mediation in some cases, multi-party, individual, family, community, corporate, workplace, every kind of mediation. And in one mediation, I had a aha moment. We started the mediation from a very distant perspective of an agreement. So the parties didn't believe that they would close an agreement. Nevertheless, we came together until the very last step to an agreement. The agreement was already drafted. And at that very last step that seemed impossible at first, something else came up, not rational at all, and they didn't close. And I spent some time thinking about what I didn't see and what I couldn't help them see. And that took me to the search of a new tool that is what I would like to spend our time, if you don't mind, talking about. Because first, although the origin is not Brazilian, it is in Brazil that it's been growing more than in other countries. It's growing in different countries, but not related to conflict resolution. And second, because it's very much to the point of the step further mediation. And many times I think about, why was I born in Brazil? I love Brazil for many reasons. And of course, I have some criticisms like anybody in any country. But I feel that I am more, sometimes I'm more similar to other cultures than the Brazilian culture. And I keep asking myself this question once in a while, especially when I'm not very happy with politics and so on, which is kind of normal. But then lately, when I was thinking about this tool that has been developed in a different way in Brazil, it seemed to me that I needed to be here to witness, to be part of it, and to maybe one day take it to the world. And this is a little bit of what we're doing here, right?
Yep.
So this new tool that in my first objective was just another tool for mediation. So after this mediation that I mentioned, I remember this technique to which I was a client at some point. And I think I told you here before, but I'll repeat just the short version. The first time that I got in touch with this methodology, it was for the fear to speak in public. I had just started my full-time mediation career. That was 2007. And I had been a mediator for a long time, but always as a plus to my to the activity where I made a living. I was always an executive of a big corporation, either as a lawyer or as a public affairs director, ombudsman, etc. But always with this making a living in the normal, the regular corporate scenario. And I decided, and I did mediation on the side at nights or weekends, and I taught mediation and I did mediations, but it was not my daily making a living activity. When I decided to do this move, the market in Brazil was still inexistent. And the only thing that I could do to be paid for, to make some money, was to teach, because most mediations were done on a voluntary basis. And so I said, well, I have to teach. And I got many invitations to teach lectures or courses, etc. But every time I had to teach, I had this sensation that I was going to face a monster. And although nobody ever noticed, I got home exhausted every time. So I heard about this methodology and I decided to take a try. And I went there and I only said that I wanted, the therapist asked, what would you like to see? What would you like to resolve? And I said, I want to overcome my fear to speak in public. And she only placed one person to represent me and one person to represent the fear. The person who represented me described what I felt in my body when I was about to speak in public. And the person who represented the fear just turned around and left the room and said, there's no place for me. I don't exist. I said, what? I said, that's crazy. That's even crazier. So, and then she did all the process, and she asked some questions, and she brought other elements, the elements that seemed to her that were connected to the fear and so on. And it was very surprising because at the end, I could see my story happening in front of me through people that never knew me, that didn't know anything about my story, my life history, or anything, or my family. And on the following day, I had to teach a 4-hour class. And I didn't even remember that I had a heart, in the bad sense, because in the good sense, yes, of course. So I felt completely light, and I had fun, and I never stopped having fun talking in public about the things that I believe and that I love. So I said, well, this is amazing. But at that point, for me, that was a therapy done by therapists, psychologists, and so on. So I was just a client to it. And then at this mediation that I mentioned, I remember this technique, and I said, there is something there, not in the parties, but in between them, that is blocking them. It's not rational. And it's not irrational. It's kind of it's tricky, because it's something that is bigger than they can ever see. They are included in it. They are absorbed by it. And so there's no question I can ask that can really help them go to the point and clear the way for the agreement. Although they believe, they understand, they rationalize that an agreement would be much better than a non-agreement. So I started searching for the training, capacity building, and I did my training, a long training, 2 years. And then I started including constellations, the name of the methodology is constellations, in mediations. Actually, and then when I learned about constellations, I understood that I already did some aspects of constellations in my mediations. And I'll open this space to talk about this. So the first time that I did a constellation in the middle of a mediation, and I didn't know the name was constellation, I had a client that spoke, you know, when it goes in circles, and the more you ask, the more the person goes back to the same point and back and again and again. And when the person is really in pain, this is not uncommon. So normally when someone is acting like that in a mediation, I do very objective questions to bring the person back to rationality. But with this client, it seemed not to work. It was a very traumatizing situation that he was explaining. So I took all the objects that I had around me. So for example, now I have here a medicine pot, another one. So, and I had a little, of course it was a business scenario, so I didn't have exactly this, but I had like a pen, a pencil, anything. And I brought all these objects to the table, and I said, use these objects to show me in 3D what you're talking about, what you're trying to explain, and I'm not getting. So please show me in 3D what you are saying. So the person started to move the objects, and he did a scheme: who talks to who reports to who looks at who relates to whom. And when we looked at the concrete image, I could make questions that were more concrete, and that he had to look, because he knew that he had put the image together, not me. So it was not about interpretation, my interpretation. It was actually about what he had been saying and not seeing. And then he could wake up and understand what he was saying and what I was trying to say so far for hours. After that, I started doing these things, and then I bought some, you know, these little objects that children use to build castles and anything.
Lego.
not exactly Lego, but seems like Lego. It was like a wood kind of, the old version of Lego. So I bought it in a toys store, and I always had it with me when I went to mediations, and I started doing it more and more often. I also did it another time. I did it with little crystals that I had at home, and they were all more or less the same. So I took them to a mediation, but then I said, well, crystals will seem too much spiritual, and so the kind of Lego worked best. So I started doing it. Then back to the constellation training. When I went to the training and I understood the mechanics of constellation, I understood that I had done was already this perception, was already this flow of understanding that the constellations bring about. So what are constellations? Constellation was a methodology. It was not invented by Bert Hellinger, this German man who passed away in 2019. He didn't invent it because, of course, as everybody in a field, you always start from something that existed before you, and you just add your own, how can I say, your own view of it, and then it becomes something else. And also because I have this, I take care of not saying that he invented it. He developed it for sure. And he spread the word about it, which was very important. And that's how it came to Brazil. But constellation is not about a human invention. Different from mediation. Mediation is very culturally oriented. So of course, although I can do an international mediation, because on an international mediation, you will have people from different places, and you need a mediator who is not from one place or the other, so who's neutral, who can be neutral and be seen as neutral. And I can do mediations in places that I understand the between the lines aspects of what the parties are bringing. But it's still very culturally affected mediation. Do you agree?
Yes, definitely. But my cultural concept is a little different from the way people put it. For me, the cultural aspect. Okay, I won't get into that, but I will finish what you were saying. Yeah.
Okay. So constellation is not about culture. It's about a natural law. It's about human beings and any kind of living beings, how they interact in a certain group, in a given group, and the laws of nature that can help a group be more functional or not so much. And normally, when we are absorbed by our group's nature, the relational pattern of a group, we are much more influenced by this pattern that is invisible, that is most of the time unconscious. It's not about being rational or irrational. It's about being conscient or unconscious, which is very different. When we talk about being rational or irrational, we start from the supposition that it could be rational. Anything that is irrational could be rational. And you're just not doing your job too well. And then you lost control of your rationality. And then it became a behavior that you didn't plan, so it's irrational, right? So this is one little part of what unconscious means. What makes something be irrational may be an unconscious factor. And this unconscious factor comes from where? most of the time, it comes from this giant network to which we belong without noticing, without even wanting. But once we are born in a given group, a family, a nation, a planet, a species, a soccer team, any group that we belong to helps shape what we are in what circumstance. This relational pattern brings about aspects of us that could be hidden from us, and we wouldn't even notice it if it was not brought up. And what makes us belong in that group? When we talk about a family, it's very easy to understand. You were born, full stop. You had a father and a mother. Even in the most different forms of family, there is always an element that came from a man and an element that came from a woman, and that we couldn't change it. Society couldn't change it. So there is this belonging, this organic belonging to two human beings that make you the way you are in terms of your, and I don't know how to say that in English, but I think it's phenotype, something like that. I mean, anything, the matter, your body, looks like what it received from these two human beings that came before you and who gave you a place on that family, on that nation, on that planet, on that group, whatever group. Besides those two human beings who are very influential, even if they don't coexist with you, so a baby that is born and cannot be raised by the mother and the father for any reason, given for adoption or lost in a war, doesn't matter why or how it happened. But even when you didn't have any conscient contact with these two beings, you belong in their field. You belong in their relational structure. And that gives you some guidance about who you are, about where you should be, about your place in life and in anything you do. So this is your basic belonging, father and mother. And then, for example, an adopted child who is raised by a completely different family, of course, he or she will belong in that family as well, but it's a different place of belonging. If you're hired in a firm, in a company, and you are the founder, this is one kind of belonging that no one will ever take from you. The founder is like the father and the mother of that child that is the company. But if you were hired as a top executive or as a cleaning person, there is a place for each one, and the belonging depends on how you got in. And a lot of problems in corporations, who has also this field governing relationships, is normally about how you put people out. And I'll get to that later on. So in whatever group we belong, once you belong, you have the right to belong. This is kind of repetitive, but it's necessary. So this is the first orders of love. Bert Hellinger called it orders of love. And as I said, he came from previous, developers of this understanding of the field, but he did very important steps, including the organization, the clear idea that could be repeated in terms of what governs the groups. So first order of love is belonging. you have the right to belong in any group that you once belonged. The second, that complements the first, is what some call hierarchy. And it means that those who came before have to be honored by those who come after. So in many religions, we have a mandate to honor father and mother. And this is not just about religion, it's about healthy relational patterns. Because no matter what happened after or even during or even before someone was born, it is these two people, the father and the mother, who gave this person a place to exist. And if you have in a family, in the family, it's very easy to understand because it's very chronological. The order is chronological. So the grandparents gave a place on earth to the parents, who gave a place on earth to you. And imagine that you have older siblings. The first one had all the work of making those parents understand what it is to be a parent, which is not an easy lesson. So when the second one comes into the family, the place of the second one is different than the place of the first, because the first already did something for that second place to exist, and so on. So when we honor those who came before, it doesn't mean that they are better than us. It doesn't mean that we have to bow to them, but it means that we have to recognize that whatever we have in life, the perfect place that we occupy in life that is unique for us. And this is exactly what we needed to develop our path. Existed because they were there before and because they did what they did. So we were blessed by not only the good things that we received, but also the difficult things, also the challenges, because we are composed by all the experiences, not only those that we voluntarily, rationally, willingly make in our lives, but also by from where we started. Basically, we are not reinventing the wheel in each generation. Not every individual have to reinvent the wheel. We have to add up to what was invented before we came. Otherwise, humanity would never develop. We would still be in the caves. So we're not in caves. We have air conditioning, we have refrigerators, we have a comfortable bed, we have a computer, we have internet, we have Zoom, because of everybody that came before us. And then we can add our step further. And this is mathematically understandable through the Fibonacci equation. So Fibonacci equation explains a lot of things in nature. Hurricanes, the way of plants, that plants develop, so many things. And also this nature of hierarchy, or the hierarchy of nature, because the Fibonacci, for those who are not familiar with this expression, the Fibonacci equation, the Fibonacci sequence, is a mathematic study on these the basis for development, and it starts with 1 in the sequence. The second number is 2, the third number is 3, but the fourth number is 5. And the function that governs this sequence is every new number in the sequence, and it goes to infinite, it goes to it's endless. Every number is the sum of the 2 that came before it. So what it explains is that we are, each one of us, we are the difference between those who came before us and what we do with our lives. It is what we do with our lives that will allow the future generations to be even better. So we are not better than the previous generations because we are special. We are better because we started from where they gave us, from the place that they gave us, including their effort to make it a little better than what they received. So this is hierarchy. And then there's the third order of love. And I'll just finish with the third order of love, because then we would go to other orders, such as order of success and order of help and other Bert Hellinger theories that I think we would need another life. So the third order is the balance between what we give and what we take. And we have to be very careful with the words, because it's very common that we say what we give and what we receive. But when we give something, because this is what makes the flow of life be sustainable. So if I give something to you and you give me nothing in return, and of course it doesn't need to be in the same currency, I will be drained, and I won't, at some point, I won't have anything to give to anybody else. If I engage in relationships where I give, and I don't get anything in return, at some point, I am not able to give anymore because I'm not fed myself. So when we think about a child and the parents, the child is there just to receive. It is the only relationship that will never be balanced, child and parents, because the child is there to receive life, and life is something that we can never pay back. The only thing that we can do to give back what we got from our parents is to do something good with the life that we have, to make the Fibonacci sequence advance. And many times we lose life. Many people lose the opportunity to live just trying to be better than the previous generations, just trying to save the parents from what they were to what we would have liked them to be. And this will never be enough, because we cannot do what was not ours to do. So when we grow up, when we are an adult with other people different than the parents, we cannot just wait to receive. We have to go there and deserve what we need to take. That's why the wording is important. When you take something, you're taking responsibility to what comes to you. It's different than just waiting there for it to fall from the sky or from God or from the government or whatever. It's this active consciousness of, I need to be responsible for what happens in my life. This requires a lot of maturity. So Bert Hellinger not only wrote so many books about this theory, but he also developed the methodology to make the constellation become conscient to the client. And he was not very concerned. He worked in a phenomenological approach. So he was not concerned about why it happens the way it happens. He was just concerned that, well, it happens. So what do I do after that? And then in one of his workshops, he received an observer whose name is Rupert Sheldrake. He is an English biologist, a very important scientist of the present time. He's alive, thank God. And he started studying this phenomenon through a very different point of view. He, as a biologist, started studying plants and then went to animals and so on, because he was interested in what makes behavior be passed through generations, especially in the aspects that matter doesn't have anything to do with it. So, for example, the frog and the salamandras, two different species, but with a lot of common structures. If you cut a piece of the salamandra, it will regenerate, but the frog doesn't regenerate. But if you do an experiment and you put some electrical stimulation on the frog, it will regenerate. So basically, it's about the salamandra going to search for the electric stimulation, and the frog, no. So of course, the frog is happy to regenerate. So why doesn't the frog look for the same stimulation? Why didn't the frog family learn how to look for the stimulation? These kind of questions he was thinking about and doing all the scientific experiments. And he realized much bigger aspects of it. So for example, the wolves and any group that is that works in big groups, any animal that lives in big groups. The wolves, for example, they live in their group, in their family, for their whole life. If you take a wolf out of his own group and puts it in a different forest, even if he spends the whole life, he will find his original group again. And some people thought that the wolves had telepathy. And it actually is a kind of telepathy, but it's governed by this field of belonging that we are all included in, even when we are temporarily excluded. So the wolves, for example, the fish, if you see those huge groups of fish that swim together for miles and miles, and they never collide and they never get lost, how can that be explained? How would you think that one little fish like that would have enough brain to rationalize his movement and his next movement and the next, looking at the neighbor and say, well, he's going left, so I have to do it, but there's the current of the sea and so on, so I have. Of course, it's not like that. There is something that bonds them together. And the birds is the same, any group. So he started studying this bond, this in-between. What happens that we are here now? Why did you find me to talk about this issue? And so on. And he understood, he developed a concept called morphogenetic fields. Morphogenetic fields is because it's a field, an electromagnetic field, that gives form to those who belong in that field. And it's this form that is not related to matter. It's related to behaviors that are unconsciously being passed generation after generation. And bringing back to humans, of course, it is the same with us. Sometimes something is manifested by one individual of a family that is exactly coherent to someone from earlier generations, many times that this person never met a great-grandfather or an aunt that was never present in that household or anything. And we think, oh no, that is kind of, she knew about it. We always, and we still, in our modern science, our current science, we still believe that the brain is inside our minds, or the opposite. The mind is inside our brain. That it's matter. That is just the neurological connection that helps us access things that are so far away. But what Rupert Sheldrake is proving, and he is still living, so it's still an ongoing work, is that this huge thing that we are absolutely absorbed by brings us some unconscious information that helps shape the image that we have of ourselves and of life, shape behavior, including those aspects that we cannot access rationally by any means. And once we bring it up to consciousness, and that's what constellation does. If I would say in a very short version, especially to business people, what constellation does is to bring up the other intelligences besides the intellectual one. Emotional intelligence, spiritual intelligence, most of all, and things that we cannot even name, but are there, and that came to us through all those previous generations. And in each generation, our step further includes necessary so that we can go ahead. We need to be in peace with everything that happened before. We don't need to fix the past. We will never fix the past. So when we want to teach our parents, it's a waste of time. Of course, they're learning, but they're learning from inside out all the time. If they are already deceased, they did what they could. And it was perfect in the world that we live in. And we needed everything that happened before us so that we could be unique, we could be singular, and we could give our addition to the development. It's not development, it's so that humanity can evolve. Evolving is more than developing. The evolution of humanity depends on our and each one's uniqueness. But we can only be unique when we are living our mission, our purpose, not anybody else's. So if you are a lawyer because your father was a lawyer, or if you are a lawyer because your father was a lawyer in the other sense, you want to be better than your father. So there are two ways of being held by the previous generation. Either you are copying the previous generation, you're repeating the pattern and not adding to it, or you're trying to be in the opposition of what happened. And I can say by my own story, my father was a lawyer, a very litigant lawyer. He loved contradiction. He did one jury in Brazil. Juries are only done for crimes against life. So he worked most of the time with corporate issues, but he did one jury a year pro bono because he loved. It was his hobby. He loved that kind of argumentation and winning against the opposition, the other party, and so on. And when I was growing up, many people said that I should be a lawyer, not exactly because of that, but because I always love to arguments and so on, in the good sense, not to discuss things. But I decided to be an engineer. I also loved mathematics and I loved physics. So I decided to be an engineer. And I said, no, I'll never be a lawyer. I don't like that. This is not for me. Although I admired my father a lot. And then when I was on the end of my first year of engineering university, I saw a movie, of Barbra Streisand. The movie was called Nuts. And I said, I have to be a lawyer. I need to be a lawyer. It was a calling. So I went to law school and I did the two at the same time, law school and engineering at the same time, very crazy. And at some point I had to choose and I chose law. But inside the legal field, I always searched for peace, which was always an opposition to my father. Not because I didn't like my father, quite the opposite. I really, truly admired him, but I didn't like the fight. I didn't see a point in the fight. I didn't see the benefit of a fight rather than an early solution that didn't need to get to the fighting point. So mediation was, when I found mediation, I said, this is what I had been searching for and what I had been trying to do before I even knew that this existed. But at that point, I was already a lawyer for 7 years. So I had already 7 years of practice when I discovered mediation. But so coming back to the constellation, once you are free from having to do the same or the opposite, because when you do the thesis or the antithesis, it's about the same reference. If you repeat or if you antagonize, the reference is still the same, and you're not helping humanity advance because you're concerned about something that happened in the past that you will not change. So in order to step further, to look further, to do more, to really fulfill your purpose of being alive, you have to be in peace. You have to really accept, but on the deepest expression of acceptance. It's not just mental. It's not saying, well, I don't like it, I wouldn't do it, I despise it, but I cannot change it, so let's go ahead. This is very shallow. You have to agree on a deeper level, which is, I take it as it is. I don't want to change it. I want to learn from it, be thankful, have gratitude to everything that was the way it could be. And then I'm free. And then I can do the best of my life to myself and to everybody around. And many times, and I'm missing your voice,
No, this is,
but
yeah.
I just want to add a little thing.
No, please go on. I'm just.
So I started really deep, diving deep into constellation thanks to mediation. And what I saw in constellation, I went to the constellation training to have a new, and it seemed to me a broader mediation tool, which happened. And we could have many conversations about how I apply it in mediations. But what constellation does goes a lot deeper. In Brazil, Brazil is the first country on earth, as far as I know so far, that included constellations in the judiciary, in the multi-door courthouse concept, and in the public health system. And the way that I use constellations many times for companies.
But the only thing, Gabriela, we've gone this side, that emotional moment of yours, that you have to tell us why that emotional moment came in. And I noticed this the last time also when we were talking, there was this particular point. That what is that about?
I always get very emotional with gratitude. It's incredible. When I see a movie, for example, that makes me cry, it's not because of the sad scenes. It's also because I'm grateful because it's helping me grow. I'm grateful. I'm deeply and sincerely grateful to the experiences that make me grow. So when I realized it, crying became a good thing. But most people don't understand it. So we have to have this explanation, which never has the time to be made. So it's very sensitive of you. But it's like this pure energy that comes up. And it's not completely rational. So it's not
very nice.
It's explainable in words.
Well, I think it's very nice because that means that you're connecting to something deeper at that moment of time. And I think that's really important. It's not just...
And it's interesting. You said deeper, I said deeper too. But when we think about the word deeper, we think about something that goes in and down. But this deeper, my feeling is that it's outwards. It's connecting me to what is much bigger than me. And it's this very good feeling, this very pleasant feeling of belonging to something that doesn't require this daily clashes that we always experience. But we will still experience it. For example, when we work in a firm and two people have different opinions about something, it's okay to have different opinions, but many times in a business meeting, we get into discussions of who has the better view than the other one, and who's right, who's wrong, and who should be leading something. And once we connect to this bigger source of energy, we don't need to fight. We're just there doing our best, giving our best. And we will argue in terms of ideas, but it's not something that really touches the pureness of what we're there to do. We can have a discussion of opposite ideas about something without taking it personal. And this is very easy to say, and I'm sure that it's very easy to understand for those who listen, but it's so hard to do. So many times when we are there in this daily hectic life, we need to have these moments of remembering that we also belong to this bigger field that is not asking us to go down. It's asking us to just help the whole energy vibrate in a higher level. So, and this is, I think this is the very point where humanity is now. We have a lot of people investing in their spirituality, their development, their enlightenment, probably much more than ever. There are much more people who are conscient about this bigger field that we belong to than there were before, because humanity is evolving because of everything that we just talked about. But it's still hard to keep our energy there.
Yeah, No, I'm still saying, Gabriel, what you just said, that maybe people are, this spirituality thing is coming up, but I think they're still trying to connect within themselves. But what you're saying about the larger connection with this larger part that is out there, I think that is where the connections have to come in, which is what I'm also been talking about. You put, of course, you put good words to what I'm saying. I like that. But this is the larger connection to the larger whole, which we have to in some way bring together.
And remain there. Many times you do I don't know, you do anything that helps you enlarge your consciousness. And I want to be very precise here with the word consciousness and unconsciousness to differentiate it from rationality and irrationality. And I'll explain why in a short while. So you're going to a Buddhist center or to whatever practice, religious practice we have, and we pray together. And of course, praying and praying here is something much bigger than saying the Holy Father or anything. Praying in the sense of connecting to the fountain. And it's much easier when we are together. So even when we are online, if you have a group of people doing a meditation together, we normally feel it much deeper and much easier than if we are alone in a room, separated from other human beings, exactly because of the field phenomenon. But anyway, so you were there, alone or in group, doing your meditation, accessing bigger understandings, and then your 20 minutes of meditation are over, and you put your suit or your whatever you dress up for for the material life, and you go there and you see yourself engaging in a discussion in the same low energy level of everybody else. So it's so easy to be drawn to the predominant energy level. And it's so hard to keep connected to the fountain. And this is where we are, and I see, at least I am, in terms of development. We are already, many of us are already aware of these bigger purposes for our lives. We endeavor a lot of efforts to be better, to access more, to understand more, but it is still very hard to act permanently in this higher level. So we keep being dragged back to low energy, to the low energy level. And that reminds me of one of the apostles. And I don't want to talk about religion itself, but when I talk about Jesus and the apostles, is more about the philosophy and the example of life more than religion, one religion. And this is the source that I have more frequently. So I'm not trying to compare with any other religion. I respect all of them. And I really believe that all religions, when you go to the basis, to the essence, they are the same. But anyway, so this is a sentence from Paul the apostle that never met Jesus. He came after Jesus, but he was the one who really spread the word most efficiently because he was very highly educated. But so when he, at the beginning of his path of trying to follow the Christian example, he said, those things that I want to do, I cannot do yet most of the time. But those things that I'm already aware and I don't want to do anymore, those I still do. So it's like you have a level of development, of evolution that is already crystallized. And in order to go further and to access further, you need to practice with a lot of discipline. Be aware and be checking on your own attitudes so that you can crystallize on a higher level. But from this point to this point, it requires a lot of effort. It won't happen like this. So, and sometimes when we reach to the point that used to bring us to a place we don't want to be anymore, and you understand that you are actually free because that attitude was not yours. So when we do a constellation like mine to the fear of speaking in public, and this is a very special example, not just because it was with me, but because not all constellations have this magical, immediate result that can be seen concretely like it was with me. Because I did a constellation one day, the following day, I felt completely different and I could teach without any kind of discomfort. But on the other hand, there were many constellations that I did to myself. For example, for migraines, I have a lot of migraines. And I did a lot of treatments from homeopathics to constellations to many other things and allopathics as well. And I still have them once in a while. They're getting weaker, but still. So I'm not saying that constellation does a miracle every time. But on that circumstance, taking it as an example again, I believed that my fear to speak in public was completely related to my father. So if I would go to a normal therapy and spend 30 years in therapy, I would spend 30 years talking about my father because he was a brilliant speaker, brilliant. And I said, wow, those who speak so brilliantly are the ones who use this tool to fight. I understand it's not always like this, but in my circle of influence, that's what came up very clearly. My father is like that. He uses it to the activity that I don't want to perform, which is litigation. So that is my contact to nobody else in my family spoke brilliantly in public. And when we did the constellation, my father didn't even show up. He was not even mentioned. It was all about my mother and my grandmother, her mother. Their relationship was very dysfunctional. I love both of them, but they fought all the time. And as a child, especially being a woman, being a girl, I had these two influences that were kind of, if I am like she wants, I'm not like she wants, and vice versa. So my mother always told me, you have to work, you have to study, and you have to make your own living and not depend on men. You can, if you marry, great, marry for love, not because you need someone to feed you. And my grandmother used to say, you study too much, you work too much. No man will ever want you. It was a mantra. She did that. She said that many times. Fortunately, when I did this constellation, I was already married, happily married, to whom I am still married. So her prophecy didn't turn real. And I study and I work a lot and I have a great husband because I must be, I did something right, probably. But it's incredible how unconsciously for a child, I loved my grandmother. I didn't want to displease her. I didn't want to disappoint her. So I did what was mine to do, what was my nature to do, because I love to work. And my mother gave me against all odds. My mother fought to give me education, to give me experiences, to give me the strength that I needed to be a professional, the professional that I am, and still be a wife and a mother and a human being. But it was thanks to her that I had this opportunity, because she didn't have. She wanted, and she was not given. But she made all the efforts necessary for me to have options. And I couldn't be more, and then I get very emotional.
It's okay.
I couldn't be more thankful. On the other hand, I know and I understand, and it was very clear in the constellation, that my grandmother did what she did because she really believed that that was the better for me, as it was the better for every woman. So in my grandmother's view of the world, a successful woman was one that had a good husband to pay her bills and to keep her as a princess in the castle, taking static treatments and going for lunch with the friends and da-da-da-da-da-da. That was a successful life in her view. And she felt very successful in her life because she had that. She had a great husband, by the way. My grandfather was the love of my life, which is a love that doesn't compete with my husband, of course, but he was a wonderful person in every sense. So she was very happy with her marriage, and she dedicated all her energy to that marriage, but with that view that that was what she wanted from life. And she couldn't accept the fact that my mother wanted something different from me. And every time, and this is what I realized in my constellation, every time that I spoke in public, it was not the fear of the fact itself. It was the fear to disappoint her, which of course was completely unconscious. If somebody told me that you are afraid of disappointing your grandmother, I would say, you don't know me. That is crazy. That is completely out of question. Just a second. Minha filha, eu estou fazendo uma conferência internacional.
Mãe, você falou tanto em inglês que eu tive um sonho de complementar.
Tá bom, minha filha.
Em inglês,
Okay, minha filha, dá licença. Sorry.
I think you have to handle that first. Don't have a problem. Handle that first. Don't have a problem. We take a break. I'll show people what's happening.
That's okay. That's okay. She's already, because she heard me speaking. I cannot have the door closed here because of many things that are still ongoing on the house. But that's why she could come in.
She's got a little worked up. She's getting a little worked up. I think you should have to take care of her.
Yeah. I have to go. But anyway, so just to finalize, when it comes up, when this consciousness that the fear to speak in public was not mine, it was my grandmother's. When I had that consciously, I could give it to her. Give it back to her. Say, okay, this is yours. It's not mine. I respect and I thank you for what you gave me. But now I'm gonna live my life as an adult that I am. Of course, I didn't do it in an actual dialogue with her, but I did it with attitude. So I disconnected to the obligation of pleasing her, because I chose my path that is not to be in opposition to her or to anybody. It's just mine.
But I think the difficulty, please.
Go ahead.
I'm just saying the difficulty for you was that on this end, your grandmother also had your best interest in mind. The mother also had your best interest in mind. It's not that she's doing something that you would feel is not for your best interest. So to balance that out, I think that's why it took so much time, baby. And then one day.
No. Because as an adult, it's very easy to understand that, but not as a child. And as a child, I was raised with a lot of my grandmother's presence. She lived with us for some time. And when you, as a child, get this kind of influence, and you cannot separate what is yours and what is theirs, the child brings it to what the child understands. So the child develops mechanisms of adapting to whatever influence it has. And the big thing, the big different from believing in rationality or irrationality to this other level of understanding consciousness or unconsciousness is what is unconscious is there for a reason that may not exist anymore, but it was there for a reason. And my conscient mind cannot go there alone to bring it up. My conscient mind doesn't have the key of that door to go to the unconsciousness and say, well, I don't need you. I don't need this object anymore. So you need this kind of methodology to bring it up. And then you're bringing it up to an adult that is already able, sophisticated enough to make choices. But the child wasn't. And our child is still living inside of us. Everybody has a hurt child inside of the self. And our big homework is to heal that child so that we can live with all the good of everything that we have ever been without trying to protect that hurt unconsciously. There is one movie that I really recommend about the life of Elton John. I don't remember the name of the movie, but it's the Elton John biography. And it's a wonderful movie to picture what I'm just saying. And I won't spoil, but the movie starts with a scene, and he is all disguised like he always did his shows in a group therapy. And then the whole movie the whole movie is about the history of his life, all the traumas, all the difficult relationship, etc., etc. And of course, the traumas happened when he was just a boy. I'll have to spoil it, okay?
Okay.
Sorry. So at the last scene, the movie goes back to that first scene, and he's there again in that therapy session. And his child comes into the room, and he looks at the child, and the child says, "Are you finally going to hug me?" And then he hugs his child. And then he's healed. And then he can make healthy choices. We can only love ourselves when our child is already loved enough by us. Our adult is the only one able to heal our hurt child. Nobody else can do it. Nobody else. And once we don't look at this child, we keep waiting for a hero who will come to save it. Because this is what children expect. And only our adult can go there.
That's a lot of food for thought, Gabriela. Now, the only thing is that we have to keep doing these sessions, because obviously people will take their time to digest what that food that you've given them. But I think this is really interesting. And you're putting, like I said, words into what the thought process that I have been talking about. You're putting getting that words also into that. So it's really nice. So this is going to continue. This is going to keep. We are going to keep this series going.
So this is chapter 1.
Chapter 1. Yes. So part 1 now, I won't push you to go any further. If that's your daughter, that daughter's getting worked up. That's your daughter?
Sorry?
Your daughter's the one who's getting a little worked up. She was saying something.
Yeah, because we are here in the new house and she didn't know where things were. So she came here and the door is open because I cannot close it. And so she came here and she said, I was listening to you speaking English for such a long time. And I also wanted to say something. I don't remember what she said now. And I was saying, oh, I'll go there. So
if she wants to come and say hi to us, she can always come. Next time we'll call her. She can.
If she came just to say hi, I would be very happy and she would be welcome. But she didn't want to do that. She just wanted to make sure that we all knew that she was around. So she was successul.
Good.
Okay.
So now.
Thank you so much for your attentive ears.
No, I love these. That's why I don't even say anything. I'm telling you, I just enjoy these conversations. Not even conversations, just enjoy listening to you. We don't even need a conversation. But this is what I call the evolution of mediators and mediation. That is what this whole thing is all about. So this is what it is. This is that vision number 1. Now this will become Gabriela Assmar part 1. Now it's going to be part 2. When is part 2 happening?
Sorry?
When are we going to do part 2?
You want a new date?
Yes, I always. You give me a date. That's it.
One moment. Should we stop the recording and then we arrange the date? Could it be like that? How about the 3rd of March? The 3rd of the 3rd.
3rd of the 3rd. Perfect. So just give me 1 second to just see what's happening. What day is it? That's perfect. That's a Friday. Friday. That's a Friday.
No, it's not Friday. It's a Thursday.
Is it? Oh, just check.
Thursday.
Yeah. Thursday. 3rd, 4th. Yeah. Perfect. So Thursday, the 3rd of March. Great. Same time?
Same time.
Same time. Perfect.
Until then, it will be much easier for many reasons.
But you are going to keep time for us. It won't be a hurried session. Right? Although it's a good thing. Actually, maybe short ones also good. It's not a bad thing. Maybe I've just got used to.
I think for those who listen, it's complicated to have like a 2-hour conversation. It's hard to follow when we're listening.
But at the end of the whole thing, this whole constellation thing, I have to get a whole grip on the whole concept and how it's working. And maybe one will do a constellation with us or something like that. Maybe.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah.
I'm very used to doing it online.
Great. No, because I told you now the one I saw with you with people from Lebanon or whatever. I don't know what they were doing. I didn't even understand what was happening, but it seemed very interesting what was happening there. So it's been good to see that.
Okay.
All right.
Bye then.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Gabriela, it's really nice talking to you. I'm saying listening to you. Very nice listening to you. And I'll see you on 3rd.